Good afternoon and welcome to the Circularity panel of The Economist's Virtual Sustainability Week, entitled Designing Out Waste. So we're going to discuss the issue of how companies are working to design out waste and increase circularity in their supply chains. What are the challenges, barriers and pinch points in this process, and how are they working with their other stakeholders and peers to find solutions to make the economy more circular? I'm Jan Piotrowski, I'm the Economist business editor, and I have with me a distinguished panel from various areas who will no doubt shed great light on this process. So we have Virginijus Sinkevičius, who is the Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries at the European Commission, Andrew Morlet, who is the Chief Executive of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Halide Alagöz, who is the Chief Supply Chain and Sustainability Officer at the Ralph Lauren Corporation, and Philippe Ducom, who is the President of ExxonMobil Europe. Andrew, I would like to start with you. There's been a lot of talk about the circular economy for many years now. As a representative of an institution which is perhaps more involved than any other in promoting the idea, could you give us a little bit of a notion of how circular the economy has got?
Thanks, Jan. Well, I think the first thing is really to understand that many people think about the circular economy as being largely about what we would call end-of-pipe waste. And that is that the circular economy is a waste and a recycling agenda, but actually it's a much bigger idea than that. It's really about how we keep products and materials in use in the system for longer at their highest value, and also aim to regenerate natural systems. The designing out waste and pollution agenda as part of the circular economy is really very important, but it's only part of the whole sort of field, if you will. The question of how far are we, I would say we're really at the beginning. The economy is extractive and linear in nature at the moment. You could characterize it as being perhaps 90% linear and 10%, if you're lucky, circular economic. But it's coming up. It's coming up in its numbers. It's being adopted, and it's growing very, very quickly. But as we sit here today, really the very, very vast majority of the economy is a very short, uses materials in a very short and disposable manner. It uses materials for a very short period of time and in a disposable manner. And effectively, most of the materials that flow through the economy end up as waste within a very, very fast amount of time. If you think of everything other than perhaps buildings and infrastructure, in Europe, we know that it's around about a 10-year lifespan for most products, materials. If you're lucky, many things move through way, way faster, and that's the bulk of the economy today. It's very, very wasteful and largely linear.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? So when you try to consider the state, the playing field at the moment, what sort of metrics do you look at? What to get a sense of that, that eyeball figure of 10 versus 90%?
Well, I think there's a number of ways you can look at it. We've done a lot of sectorial analysis over the years. We've looked at durable goods, fast-moving consumer goods, mobility. We've done over 20 major studies in the last 10 years, really trying to quantify material flow economics and the extent of waste. The metrics that we use are really around material flows. So we're trying to really track how long materials that enter the economy stay in the economy, how long products are used, how intensively they're used before they actually become disposed of, and again, it's quite sector specific, as you could well imagine. If you think of consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods, by the nature of their name, they move through the economy very quickly. We've done a lot of work on plastics and plastics packaging. we see these products move through the economy in very short time frames, and then we see them enter into a waste system, and the majority of that gets landfilled, incinerated. In the plastics world, plastics packaging, about 33% of that globally leaks out of the formal collection systems into the natural environment, becoming pollutants and accumulative waste. And only a very, very small proportion is actually collected for recycling, about 14% of plastics packaging, of which only about 2% gets reinserted into the value chain. If you look at fashion, it's a similar story. Less than 1% is actually collected and reinserted into the value chain post-use. And clothing is used less and less frequently. The trend is that people own much more clothing, use it much less, and then dispose of it much more quickly. And again, it mostly ends up landfill incineration and leaking into natural environment. Things like cars are parked 30% of the time. The majority of cities are taken up with roads and parking spaces. Around more than 50% of cities are that type of usage. And cars are generally parked for about 90% of the time. And when they're used, they typically have less than 2 people in them. So that's what we would refer to as structural waste. And it's a very, very big number.
Thank you. You mentioned fashion. Halide, I would like to turn to you. So, Ralph Lauren, could you give us a sense of how your company approaches this issue and how you deal with a lot of the criticisms that the fashion industry as a whole receives in this context?
Sure. At Ralph Lauren, we believe we have a unique approach to sustainability because our brand is built on the notion of timelessness. We create things that are meant to be loved and worn for many years, passed on to the next generation. And this has informed how we approach sustainability and circularity in general. Over the last 50 years, our timelessness concept has been defined by the desirability and the longevity of our products. But now what we're doing is we're redefining timelessness to encapsulate circular design principles. How can we design through the lens of circularity when we are creating the products, from the components we use, from the processes we apply in production, from the packaging we will use when it's reaching the consumers. And on the other end, how can we expand our consumers' experiences after they buy our products? So more specifically, our circularity approach has 3 components, 3 prongs. 1 is designing for circularity. 2, creating circular customer experiences. And 3, advancing a circular product economy. If I should share some examples for design for circularity, we have set a goal to have 5 of our iconic products Cradle to Cradle certified by 2025. We call these products icons because they've been with us, with our consumers, for a very long time. They are made year-round and represent some of the Ralph Lauren all-time favorites for our consumers globally. They vary from polo shirts to chinos to sweaters to our denim programs. On the customer experiences, we recently launched the Lauren Look, which is a rental subscription program. And we will offer more of these circular experiences for our consumers starting next year by enabling product collection to support resale, recycling options for some of the beloved Ralph Lauren products, or upcycling of those products. And we are enhancing our vintage selling capabilities as well. And on the circular product economy, how we are looking at it is we need scalable innovations. Not all the solutions are in place, so we're trying to be a part of the solution by investing in innovations. We recently had an investment in a company called Natural Fiber Welding, and together with them, we are working on delivering 100% recycled cotton products of the same desirability, softness, and functional and emotional qualities for our consumers across our portfolio during the next 3 years.
So to follow up on that, so you say 5 of the iconic products. Out of a range of how many, and sort of what's the proportion of your output that is sort of cradle to cradle, or will be cradle to cradle by 2025?
The quantification, we don't have the volume quantification, but what I can say is these are our core programs. These are our iconic programs. And when you add all these programs on top of each other, it makes today more than half of our business. So it's quite a considerable amount of business will turn into circular, but we are starting with one now, learning through it. And our ambition is really to scale it up as soon as we can, as quick as we can.
So, and I have one more follow-up, and this is something that's been bugging me for a long time, and that is, I see how Ralph Lauren, as a very cherished, established brand, and a premium brand, can bet on timelessness. But you also charge a premium for that timelessness, and it's a sort of, it's an exclusive product, and by definition, not every product can be exclusive. Because it's a positional good. So, do you have any thoughts about the broader industry? I mean, obviously, not everyone can be timeless, just because of the nature of the products that you sell and that other fashion brands sell. So, how do you think about circularity in the broader context of the fashion industry?
I believe there is a lot of untapped opportunity for the fashion industry. I mean, overall, for any company, I believe we must transition to a circular economy. It is, it has a lot of benefits, of course, to the planet to heal and renew itself, but it also has a lot of business benefits of keeping the product in use longer than they are planned, to create new revenue streams. When you reduce costs, when you reduce waste, you add up to your margins, you improve your brand reputation, you create a new kind of connectivity and long-term relationship with your customers, and that brings you a competitive differentiation. I think many players, big players of our industry, are now rethinking the traditional principles of retail, and they are creating pathways that are relevant to their businesses. As you say, we all have different business models, but I see a big movement and huge levels of collaboration in the industry. Like I said, not all the answers are in place, so we're working together to find those answers.
Philippe, I would like to turn to you now. Obviously you're a representative of a very large extractive industry, and I was wondering how you view circularity, and have you also seen some commercial opportunities in the circular approach, or is it basically, for a company like Exxon, is it basically a threat?
Well, first of all, I would say, why is all this important? Well, because it helps protect the planet. I think Halide said that. Reducing waste and emission is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It helps address some of the most important challenges of our times for us and for the generations to come. So when we think about circular economy, I think the concept makes a lot of sense to me. The question is its application. Make sure that its application is based on sound science and looks at the net benefits to society through the life cycle of products. And we have examples in our industry where this has already been the case, where we have circular models in place. I was thinking about catalysts, which are products that are used in the manufacturing process in chemical reactions. The suppliers produce and own the catalyst, lease it to the customer. When the activity of the catalyst goes down, it's sent back to the producer, who then rejuvenates it, sends a new batch, and there is no waste in that process. There are all sorts of reasons why it's working well. I think Andrew gave another example, plastics, where it's a much more complex set of value chain, and we're still early in that transition. When you look at plastics in particular, there are issues with plastics. We're very conscious of that, and they need to be solved. But we also need to realize that plastics make significant contributions to society, positive contribution. Think about carbon footprint, energy consumption, water use, all this when you compare with products like aluminum, steel, glass, or paper, it's significant contribution. But plastics have no place in the environment. It's unacceptable to us, unacceptable to society, and that challenge has to be addressed. And I think that's where circularity can deliver some of the solutions we need to get there. I think plastic circularity as Andrew said, it covers many topics. One of them is and will be creating value from waste, providing opportunities to recycle this product and make them valuable in the future. When we think about what needs to change, it's looking at entire value chains versus just single products. So how do we approach that? I think for industrial companies like us, minimizing waste in our own operations is a necessity. It's something we have been doing and working on for decades with our suppliers and with our customers, and that traditional approach has delivered huge benefits. But we have also been working with our customers to help them do more with less, the reduce piece of reduce, reuse, recycle, to lengthen the life of their products, improve durability, and then you can go from 1 year to 3 years to more. But when you think about the concept of being more circular, that's where we need to look at entire value chains. And I can give you just briefly three, four simple examples of how we can contribute in making value chains more circular, still using plastics as an example, because that's one where we know we have opportunities. One is, I think Halide mentioned the word, how to design for circularity, and I would add with end of life in mind. Well, we do that obviously in partnership with our customers, and just thinking about how to make products more easily recyclable. And the example I would give here is detergent and dishwasher pods pouches, the standard pouches that you find in the markets. The traditional design is multiple layers, different plastics in the packaging, difficult to recycle. The work we have been doing with our customers, and the customers are leading, is to convert that into single polyethylene laminated pouches that are more easily recyclable while having the same performances. Another example is advanced material that can help and facilitate recycling. And what those products bring, we have one in our product family called Vistamax, which is an advanced polymer, is when you add it during the recycling process, it adds compatibility and enhances the performance of the recycled product. The very simple example I would use is in Patagonia, discarded ropes and nets are a big problem. And a group in the community where we worked was looking for solutions to recycle them. Unfortunately, easier said than done. So ropes and nets are typically made of incompatible plastics, 2 or 3 of those, and it's very difficult to separate them. By using that Vistamax, it becomes possible to recycle them. They become compatible again. And just by using that technical solution, that product, they could recycle 1,000 tons of ropes in a year and convert them into crates. Just another example of where we have new products and businesses that we're developing. The two last very quick example I would mention is first developing technology solutions. And it's the idea being to maximize the value of the waste that is available and converting into raw material. In practice, we have now just completed the first phase of a commercial plant trial for producing using advanced recycling technology to convert plastic waste into raw materials for new high-value polymers. We have done that in our integrated complex at Baytown, which is our biggest complex, one of the biggest complexes we have in the world. And the idea here is to provide valuable outlets for end-of-life plastics. And the last example I would mention is, well, when you talk about end-of-life, you have the challenge of collection and sorting. And while in many of the developed countries we have collection and sorting, there's still a gap, which is something we are working on. And I've just formed a joint venture with a company called Agilis Corporation. The joint venture is called Cyclics, and it focuses on developing solutions for aggregating and pre-processing large volumes of plastic waste that can then be converted into feedstocks and valuable products. And that ultimately will help supply our big advanced recycling machines and bring circularity to that process.
So I do have to ask you a follow-up. And so these are 4, interesting initiatives. Are they big? I mean, or are they pretty niche? As part of your overall portfolio. I suspect it's it's almost on the margin. So correct me if I'm wrong, but if it is quite niche, what is the obstacle to making them more widespread? Is it technological? Is it a question of incentives that need to be imposed from the top down? Why aren't companies, yours among them, doing more of this stuff that you just described, which does sound very interesting?
I think, and I'm just going to use these examples very quickly to show you where we are. And I think Andrew said it well. We are still, in many cases, in the early phases of circularity in some of those things. But designing for circularity is becoming more and more the standard. And you can see more and more customers being interested in that and us working with them. The type of products I mentioned, Vistamax, which helps bring new life to a recyclable product, is growing extremely fast. Those are very high performance products which meet a very specific need. The piece where we are still in the early stages and early phases are around technology development and deployment of advanced recycling, or this aggregation and pre-sorting of large volume of plastic waste. And there, I think the question is, how do you bring together policies, infrastructure, and technologies so that you can meet the objective and the aspiration of society? And how this fits together really depends of where we start. And I think Andrew quoted numbers that I'm going to quote in a slightly different way. If you start in the developing world, there is a major challenge with waste management infrastructure. At least 3 billion people worldwide lack access to controlled waste disposal facilities. In other words, about 1/3 of all municipal solid waste isn't managed in an very safe way. As a result, there is waste leakage, including about 12% of that waste is plastic, ends up in the environment. That is not something that is acceptable. That is not how plastic is going to contribute to society in these developing regions. And it needs to be a priority in those regions. It's about infrastructure. In our European reality here, Europe has waste collection aggregation systems in place, and the continent collects about 30 million tons of plastics every year. But as Andrew mentioned, while reuse, reduce, recycle has been in place since the 70s, about 2/3 of European plastics that have been collected end up in landfills or end up being incinerated. So that's the main challenge we have. It's go from a waste-oriented to a resource-oriented structure. And in order to do that, we need to align policies with the solutions. And I could go into more details into that. Basically, when you think about just the solution we call recycling, mechanical recycling, the one you and I have known for ages, where you just break the plastic down back into pallets and then produce new products with that, works very well. Works very well if the plastics are segregated. You can convert plastic bottles into new products. It's efficient, but it's limited because it has to use similar types of plastics, and you can't do over and over again because the plastic degrades in that process. In order to eliminate plastic waste, we need solutions that can also handle mixed plastics and soil plastics. This is where advanced recycling can make a big difference. It breaks down plastic back into the molecular building blocks and then reconstructs new plastic with exactly the same performance of what you can buy from NEAT. It is demonstrated at 1,000-ton scale, but in order to fully commercialize, that kind of technology needs to be included in the technology set by the regulator. We also need certification systems, such as the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification Plus that we have been getting for some of our facilities. We need traceability, and all this to make sure that we have customer confidence and credibility. And last thing I would say on that, to have impact, we need harmonization of regulations, because if everything is done at the country level, it's going to be extremely complicated for us to deploy our solutions.
So before I get to the regulator with Virginijus, I would like to ask Andrew to chip in. Andrew, if you wanted to comment.
Just a couple of comments, because I think Philippe touched on a number of the solutions that are important, but he missed a few that are actually very important. And what's really, really clear from all of the research is that we're never going to recycle our way out of this problem, and that we have to actually talk about elimination in terms of dramatically reducing the volume of plastics that are placed on the market. So that's the first point. We have to eliminate, and there is loads, many examples that can be designed out of the system. We need to rethink how we actually deliver products to people and rethink how we use plastics in the economy. That's really essential. The second thing is that we have to keep plastics in the system longer. We have to find reuse models and find ways of actually reducing the flow of plastics through the system. And finally, just in terms of the infrastructure point and the waste point, which gets a lot of focus. I mean, a lot of the industry that is really invested in plastics on the market looks at this as being a waste and recycling problem. That is a hugely challenging problem globally. To actually put the infrastructure in place just to collect the plastics is a multi-$100 billion a year challenge. The industry sort of woken up to the need for infrastructure and has considered ways of actually putting money into the post-use collection, but we have to fundamentally look at EPR systems and radically increase the amount of investment that goes into infrastructure in order to be able to collect that, prevent it from leaking into the ocean and other natural systems. And I think it's important that this is not going to be solved by technology alone. It's not going to be solved by recycling alone. We have to really think hard about the way in which we design for elimination of plastics as much as the collection and the sorting and reprocessing.
Virginijus, I would like to turn to you now. You obviously represent a regulator and of a very, very large market of over 500 million people, which is and Europe has always been, for a very long time, has been the leader in all things circular. So what policy solutions do you see as being the most important and most your highest priorities, basically, to try and get the ball rolling, as it were?
Okay, thank you for your question. So I'll begin that in the EU we are aware of the difference that appropriate policy and legislative measures can make in fostering the circular transition. The EU eco-design scheme, eco-design directive is probably one of the best examples of this. It has been a game changer in fostering energy efficiency, with rules adopted for more than 30 energy-related products to date, and some complemented by energy labeling requirements. Of course, more changes are now required, and we have set out a blueprint for this in last year, actually exactly a year ago, in March. We adopted the Circular Economy Action Plan for a cleaner and more competitive Europe. This presents a set of interrelated policy and legislative initiatives to accelerate the transition. And it is an ambitious plan, and we are well on track to deliver. One of examples, this was the recent proposal for a new regulatory framework for batteries, taking into account for the very first time the whole life cycle of the batteries. It aims that all batteries placed on the EU market should become sustainable, high performing, and safe all along their entire life cycle. And it introduces a number of innovative measures. And let me just mention that the requirements on carbon footprint, recycled content, and mandatory green public procurement. So as all of the speakers said before, there is no way out of this, and there is no single solutions that you can take. There must be a multiple ones. So another probably good example is the planned Sustainable Product Policy Initiative that will aim to make sustainable products the norm and ultimately assist industry in leveraging the growing consumer demand for sustainable and circular products. We plan to step on the approach of the Eco-Design Directive and extend it to cover further sustainability objectives and as broad a range of products as possible. It's important to start with those identified as key value chains, such as electronics, ICT, textiles, of course, furniture, as well as intermediate products such as steel, cement, and chemicals. And while this framework will be progressively rolled out in 2021, will be a key year for kick-starting this agenda, with initiative to also empower consumers, address green claims, and ensure products placed on the EU market are sustainable. There was lots of mentioned one more thing, which I think it's extremely important to touch, is of course waste. The circular economy action plan also highlights the priority to prevent waste from being created in the first place. And in this respect, the Commission will put forward waste reduction targets for specific streams as part of a broader set of measures on waste prevention. The first in line to consider is packaging, where the amount of waste generated has reached record levels in 2018. We were at 174 kilograms per EU citizens, the highest level since measurement started. So we will also need to increase quality recycling and, of course, support member states and businesses in implementation of the EU waste legislation. But not only this, demand for recycled materials also needs to be drastically boosted. The action plan outlines measures, including regulatory ones, to increase the uptake of recycled content and secondary raw materials markets. And all this will, of course, serve the objective of significantly reducing total generation and halving the amount of residual municipal waste by 2030. So, of course, there are great solutions, but I think the key approach here and the key message is that we have to prevent waste before it happens. That's the most effective way. Rest is of course something that you already deal with, something that already happened.
So I have a follow-up question for you, and that is, eliminating waste sounds great, except for everyone who's lower down the value chain. So if I waste less, it means I'm using less of stuff earlier on. I'm either using something for longer, so I don't need to buy as much of it, or I'm sort of reusing it, so I don't need as much of the raw material. So shifting away from the linear to a circular model will be incredibly disruptive down the supply chain. And I think that in Europe, within Europe, it seems to me that a lot of the companies in Europe are near the top of the value chain. Are these policies? These policies risk hurting large swathes of economic activity lower down the supply chain? Especially in developing countries where a lot of these resources, lower level resources, come from.
I thank you very much. I think you've touched a very good corner, and I think this pandemic is a good reminder to all of us that we might be vaccinating, Europe or United Kingdom faster than the rest of the world, but that's not the way out of it. We are all in this together. Same goes with the biodiversity loss, with the climate change. If we really want to fight it, we're going to have to find a ways to help developing world as well. We cannot be, addressing those issues domestically, but exporting them to developing countries. So here I would say that, the circular economy is a win-win proposition for both the environment and, of course, business. And for the environment, it means, of course, less waste and pollution, and moving significantly closer to our climate and biodiversity goals. And we will achieve this, of course, by getting the greatest value of products and materials circulating in the economy. That's also something what is important to protect, let's say, our value chains, because we saw some major disruption when the first wave of pandemic came with the logistics chains and so on. If you look at it from an individual business perspective, a circular approach, first of all, brings more certainty and savings. Just consider that, currently EU manufacturing firms, they spend an average of 40% on materials. So using less primary raw materials and more recycled content would increase their profitability and protect them from fluctuating raw materials prices. It would also provide, more security by lessening their dependence on complex supply chains that are potentially subject to geopolitical disruption or other risks, such as this pandemic, which became a challenge for logistic chains. Circularity also creates new business opportunities. More innovative business models emerge based on a closer relationship with customer, customization, and the sharing and collaborative economy. And this can all be powered by, of course, digital technologies such as the Internet of Things, big data, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. The circular economy also creates new employment opportunities. Getting more value out of materials, products, and assets can create new jobs for high and lowest skill segments of the workforce. The transition to circular economy involves shifts to design, cleaner production processes, more efficient, of course, logistics and reverse logistics, and new services to consumers. So the growing sectors of recycling, repair, remanufacture, and refurbishment will all require specialized skills and offer enormous job potential. So I think it's extremely important to mention is that the circular economy creates jobs within a range of skills, that it creates jobs not only in big cities, but also in small towns and the remote regions. And these jobs are more resilient to economic crisis and more difficult to delocalize. So I think there is a multiple wins in it. And in the end of the day, of course, we can heavily contribute by reaching our climate goal, by decreasing the pressure from our planet.
Thank you. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I'd like to finish with you. I mean, obviously, what Virginijus said is it sort of makes sense for the people, again, higher up in the supply chain, but it would be incredibly disruptive for the purveyors of the raw materials. With your plans at Ralph Lauren, are you meeting some resistance from your traditional suppliers who are worried that you will be, a smaller customer for them now that you're using a lot more reused or recycled materials as opposed to the virgin sort?
What we're doing in there is working with our supply chain, working with our strategic suppliers, and turning into these circular models together with them rather than replacing them with new partners. And to be honest, I have not seen any resistance from any of our strategic partners. But of course, there is a certain level of anxiousness short term, because there are a lot of obstacles on the way, some economic, some mechanical. Not all the solutions are in place, but I'm proud with the level of suppliers that we work with. Some of them are ahead of us. Some of them are investing in these innovations and raising a hand and asking us if we want to be a part of this. Like I said before, I think what we have to do is collaborate further, high levels of collaboration, strategic alliances, a strong focus on scalable innovations. A lot of the innovations stay in the labs today. And to do it within your network of stakeholders, not on your own, our mission has to be searching for the good together rather than just doing less harm on our own. And also, I would like to highlight the importance of including our customers in this as well. We need to work on projects that also have a clear value proposition for them, so they can also be a part of the solution. The examples I shared of these 100% recycled cotton polo shirts, we also have 100% recycled PET polo shirts. We worked with existing and new supply chains to create opportunities. Like it was said before, there are new opportunities, new business models, new economic models created in different parts of the world. To do all of this work, we worked with our suppliers, we worked with innovation companies, we worked with digital companies, Internet of Things companies. For example, we use digital product IDs on our products, which allows us to track and trace the product in the supply chain, so we know where it's coming from. But also it helps us stay connected with the customer, so we can continue to connect with them. talk to them, tell stories, and help them to bring the products back to their second use in an easier way. Like I said, I think everybody is aware of the urgency of the situation. Everybody wants to be a part of the solution. What we have to do is to remove some of the short-term obstacles on their way. We talked about a lot of what businesses can do, different kind of incentive systems, different maybe tax systems. There are short-term commodity price dynamics that actually create some anxiousness. The cost of the virgin materials at times are better than the cost of the recycled or recyclable material. So in the absence of a resilient business model, it's very easy to get trapped in short-term margin worries and go for wrong components, wrong processes. So it's important to stay the course. It's important to hold hands and collaborate and find the solutions together.
Well, that was a wonderful note to end on. It was sort of optimistic but realistic at the same time. I'm afraid we've run out of time. I would like to thank you all very much for a very stimulating discussion. I'm sure we could go on for many, many more minutes, but unfortunately we don't have that time. So thank you very much, and perhaps we can reconvene in a couple of years' time to see how much progress has been made.